Everyone and everyone who is watching the recording, because we are also recording this session, to our webinar from university accommodation into the private rented sector. And we're going to talk about how to move out of halls, move into the private rented sector, and how to live in your new home sustainably. So my name's Marta Nowicka. I work at Students Organising for Sustainability UK as a project manager. This webinar is part of a project that I work on called Homes for Study, which I'll introduce on the next slide. I just wanted to make a point. If you are attending the session live, please ask any questions that you have using the Q&A function, and I'll be happy to take them at the end of the session. So this webinar talks about the experience of moving into PRS or the private rented sector kind of more generally, but it specifically supports our Homes for Study campaign, which focused on helping students reduce their exposure to energy poverty. So the general aim of this campaign is to improve students' energy literacy, and we do this by targeting action on energy efficiency behaviours, choosing energy efficient properties, and improving their home efficiency and thermal comfort, and navigating the energy market. This supports students to be equipped with knowledge and skills to make informed decisions about properties that they rent and how to reduce energy costs without decreasing their general overall comfort level, and actively help to alleviate fuel poverty. We do this work because we know it's needed. So we've been researching this issue of student housing in the private rented sector since 2013, and we actually just had our newest research come out last week on this, which was carried out in partnership with Universities UK. And we took a new kind of in-depth look into student experiences of the private rented sector, and in particular experiences with energy. So we had a sample of just over 100 students who told us about their experiences during a time of the national energy and cost of living crisis. And here are some kind of key findings that you can see on the slide in more detail. So we know that 54% of students have experienced damp or mold on walls or ceilings in the current accommodation, and 57% have experienced condensation, again, in the current accommodation. Almost half say that their accommodation is poorly insulated or experiences drafts. 70% say that they limit the length of time they have their heating on to save money on energy bills, which does leave 59% of students uncomfortably cold in their current accommodation, which then, as a result, also makes them feel anxious or depressed. So these are kind of very common issues in the private rented sector in terms of the student experience, and unfortunately, compared to the research we have from previous years, these things have got worse over the past kind of 5 years. So we can see the kind of really direct connection to the energy and cost of living crisis here. So this is kind of why we do this work. So let's move on to the actual topic of the webinar, and we'll first talk about the process of leaving halls, which is a chaotic time for many students. So in this section, we'll just kind of run through how you can leave your halls in the most sustainable way possible. So first of all, stuff. We all somehow managed to accumulate a vast amount of clothes, items, and admittedly a lot of random things whilst we're at university. And we're leaving our halls, so kind of moving out for the first time. There are certain actions you can take to reduce how much of all of that stuff ends up in landfill. Obviously, ideally, you will take everything that you brought with you or you accumulated, and you'll take that into your new home. But if for whatever reason you cannot do that, or you can't keep it in storage, first of all, donate or sell things instead of throwing them away. Many universities and student unions, and also many city councils that host universities, have end-of-year donation schemes that they organise, or drop-off points where you can come and drop off your things that you won't be needing anymore. And then very often those items are then offered to new-coming students come the autumn semester. So things like kettles and pots and pans and plates, if you're not taking them, then very often they are just getting kind of passed on to the next group of students who don't want to buy them or can't buy them. Of course, if the item is in kind of bad enough condition that it's not okay to pass it on, make sure that you recycle it if possible. If it's not possible to do it via a kind of normal council or your bin collection, there are also recycling centres where you can drop that off, and you can research that, for example, on the Recycle Now website. The next thing is talking to the people that you'll be living with, so your new housemates or maybe current housemates that you're just moving in together into the private renter sector with, in terms of what you might be willing to share or not share when renting privately. So that's things like in the kitchen, if someone has their own kettle, for example, are they happy for everyone else to be using that? Are you sharing pots and pans and crockery and cutlery? Or is there someone who doesn't want that used communally and would rather keep to themselves? Make it clear, because people will probably already have bought some things or have acquired them while living in halls. And it just doesn't make sense to have 3 toasters and 3 kettles in one kitchen. And this way you'll avoid potentially buying things that someone already has, and having that extra clutter in your communal space. The next thing is bills, which is a touchy subject for some people, that this is something that really needs to be considered before leaving your halls of residence and moving into the private rented sector, because bills are inevitable and they are more likely to be separate rather than all together, as they typically are in halls of private residence, unless you've specifically signed and kind of all-inclusive agreement with your letting agency or your landlord. Again, we advise having a conversation with your new housemates about how you will go about splitting bills, because this will save you a lot of stress and unwanted debts in the future. So the first thing to consider is who will be the main person responsible for the bills, whose account will be connected to those bills, who will have direct debits coming out for these things, or are you going to sort it in some other way where someone will make a card payment, for example, for water twice a year and everyone kind of chips in? So that's one thing. There's also the kind of general responsibility of people's names being on the bills. So I'd highly recommend that everyone who is responsible for paying a bill, so who lives with you in the house, is actually on that bill, because then that makes them legally liable for that bill. It's also helpful for their credit score, in case they don't know that. But that is just helpful for you because it doesn't just put the kind of legal burden of the bill on you if you are the person that decides to set things up or be the person kind of directly paying the bill. It does kind of give you that extra bit of security that there is someone else also liable to the utility, for example, company, not just you. The next thing is considering how much everyone in your housing arrangement is willing to spend or can afford to spend on bills per month, and you'll probably need to compromise on how much, for example, you're willing to keep the water running, if you have a water meter, or how toasty someone likes to be in their house. 25 degrees is a bit too much for the whole house to be like that, for example, and it would get very expensive, especially with the current energy prices. So have that conversation, make it clear, and make it clear kind of before the heating season, just so no one gets unpleasantly surprised either with a really high bill or with something that they're not used to in terms of like a home temperature. There are kind of different ways of managing bills in group accommodation. You could set up an account just for bills that has kind of everyone's names on it, where everyone chips in and the bills go out of that account. The caveat to that is that as soon as you have your name together with someone else on a bank account, then you are tied with that person in terms of your credit history and credit score. So if there is someone with a really poor credit score And I appreciate that this might not be something that every student thinks about. But if you're ever interested in getting a loan or getting a mortgage, buying a house, then this is something to consider. That kind of tying yourself with a bank, with someone else, if you're not 100% sure that they are responsible and don't have any debts or anything like that, as much as possible, that they don't go around spending on credit cards, for example, loads and loads, just something to bear in mind. So an account is an option. I'm not sure if it's the best option, because again, this is also something that you'd have to manage at the end of the year. For example, if everyone's moving out, you'd have to close that account, make sure that everyone gets their fair share of money left over. So it is an option, but it does come with a lot of caveats to it. So I'd probably suggest that everyone kind of pays from one account that's just named to one person. That's probably kind of safest for everyone legally, but that everyone's name is on the bill. And of course, it would be best if you could all transfer your fair share of money to the person paying it before it goes out of their account, just so they're not out of pocket for everyone else's share of that bill when it comes up. And then finally, a final point to consider is splitting payments for items that you might use communally. So things like cooking oil or cleaning products or toilet roll, if you're all sharing a bathroom. It would be good if it wasn't just one person paying for every time. And again, there are different ways of managing it. You could do it in turns, or you could have a kitty, a jar when someone puts a bit of money into it kind of every month. And then you kind of pay yourself out if you buy something like cooking oil. So that's about bills and general payments. Let's move in to the next section on moving in. So you have your new place, you're excited to get settled, and here are some kind of key things that you should do as you move in before you put up your fairy lights and do all of the decorating and make your house a home. So first of all, you want to take meter readings. Absolute first thing to do, because you don't want to be paying someone else's bill for someone else's energy or water use if you have a water meter at your new property as well. So as soon as you arrive, make sure that you read the meters. If you're not sure where the meters are or you can't locate them, get in touch with your landlord or with your letting agency. They will be able to let you know. So on the slide, you can kind of see an example of what a meter looks like. To read a meter, an electricity meter, for example, that has a digital display, you should write down the first 5 numbers from left to right, and any other numbers, you can just ignore them. So that's the electricity meter reading. A gas meter reading is similarly either write down the first 5 numbers that are shown from left to right on a digital meter, that's a metric one, or if it's an imperial meter, write down the first 4 numbers from left to right. And then any numbers that are either after the decimal point or that are shown in red, you can disregard them. So either 5 or 4 from left to right, and nothing that's in red or after a decimal point. So that's how you take the reading. After you take the reading, you should submit that to the current supplier of your energy. And again, you should know who that is from your either letting agent or landlord, or there will be a letter from an energy supplier that will arrive after the previous tenants have moved out. After you kind of submit that first reading, you can switch suppliers if you'd like to and if it makes financial sense. Currently, the advice is not to switch because the energy market is in crisis and it has been in crisis for a long time. So there aren't really any deals that you could be making on energy, but the situation might change in the future. It's all kind of to be confirmed. So that's on the meters. And if you ever need to refer to the advice on how to read a meter, Citizens Advice has really good guides with kind of visual representations of how to read all sorts of different types of meters. Next thing to consider is getting a smart meter. So if you are paying the bills directly, so if you are the person whose name is on the bill and you are directly paying the bills to the energy company and not your landlord, you should get a smart meter. The way it works is a smart meter basically replaces a meter like this. And it comes with an in-home display, which you can see an example of on the slide. And what it does is it basically takes the meter readings automatically and it submits them to your energy supplier automatically. So even if the meter is, for example, in the basement, you don't want to go there to take a reading every month, it will still take that reading for you. And any bill that comes from your energy supplier will always be accurate instead of estimated. So you will actually be paying for what you use rather than what the energy company estimates that you use, which is usually higher. And it comes with the convenience factor of not having to read your meters yourself, not having to go into the basement or go outside, and not kind of having to have that mental load of remembering to do it. So as long as you are the person directly paying your bills, you can ask for an installation of a smart meter. So just get in touch with your energy company and get that sorted. You don't have to ask for a permission from your landlord or from your letting agency. This is just kind of part of your rights as someone who pays the bills. The next thing is the inventory. So you read the meters. I recommend that being the absolute first thing you do after getting the keys to your new place. The second thing is doing the inventory. So your letting agency or your landlord may provide you with an inventory document. Make sure that you review what's in there. And if anything that's in there is incorrect, make sure that you either make amends, let them know over email, best with some kind of extra evidence attached to it. And make sure to do this in writing to have a record of this communication. Make sure that everything's correct, nothing is missing, that any faults that you've noticed as soon as you moved in are highlighted. If the inventory document comes kind of already filled out, rather than one for you to fill out, and something that's in there is incorrect, again, let your agency know over email, and if you can attach any evidence to that, great. And the reason you want to do this is because anything that goes wrong, or anything that might cause you to lose your deposit, or might be kind of a ground for the retention of a deposit, if it's in the inventory from the beginning, then nothing can be taken away from you. So if there are stains on the wall, for example, and you've noted that in the inventory and you've provided some evidence of this the second you moved in, then by the time you move out, your deposit will be protected. You will not be charged for those stains on the walls because you've already told your landlord that this is a problem when you moved in. That wasn't sorted. So connected to the inventory is taking photos. So any issues that you find around the house when you first arrive, either to do with the inventory or just something that needs repairing, that you need to ask your landlord or your letting agent to arrange repairs for, make sure that you get this evidence. Take all photos of everything you can around the house. Make sure that you check the walls, the floors, any furniture for stains or holes. Make sure that you inspect any seals around the shower or sink, but also kind of seals around windows and door frames, to check that there's kind of no drafts coming in. Check any furniture, so any parts that are falling out, any backs of shelving units that are sticking out, any shelving that's attached to the wall, make sure that it's actually kind of secure and it's not just going to fall off if you put something on them. And again, request repairs or notify your agency of any issues over email in writing. So we do sometimes find that it's easier for people to report things over the phone, and it's easier to arrange a visit over the phone, but it's always really important to make sure that anything you agree in a phone conversation is actually also noted down in writing. So even if you've called your letting agency and you've let them know about something, particularly if it's an urgent issue, then it's better to call them. But make sure as soon as you kind of get off the phone, follow up in writing and just say, thank you for chatting to me just now. Just wanted to make a note that this is what we've agreed. A person will come and look at something or sort something within the next 2 days, for example, if that's what you agreed on. It's always better to have things in writing just to ensure that your deposit is safe and that you can then refer back to things and no one will forget that it happened. So yeah, as previously mentioned, it's just important to have evidence to back up any claims that you make. And here are some kind of additional points that are important to remember when you move into a new place. Any mail that arrives from the council, make sure that you respond to it, especially if the council sends, for example, a record of people living at the address, and there's old names on there, so names of the old tenants and your names are not on there. Make sure to update them. And this usually can either be done with a form that they send you by post, or they send you kind of an access code on their website where you can go on and change all of the details and make sure that everyone who actually lives at the property is noted for the council as residing there. Get yourself on the electoral register. This way you will be able to vote in any local elections. And again, this is something that also helps your credit score if this is something you're thinking about. Make sure to look secondhand, first of all, if there's anything that's kind of missing, so some items or appliances missing either from your house or from kind of the general group of things that people bring to contribute. So if you don't have a toaster, for example, or a kettle, look secondhand. Charity shops in the UK always have a lot of different things, especially for the kitchen, that are very cheap and in good condition. And it's always better to prolong the life of something that's already there rather than contributing to the demand for new items. Okay, and our final bit of this session is the kind of general living arrangements. So once you've already settled, you've done your inventory, you've set up your bills, what next? First of all, make sure you understand your waste collections. Some universities have different waste management systems and providers to the ones that are used in the local council's area. This was the case for me in Sheffield, and moving into my second year house was very confusing in terms of what I could recycle. It's particularly true for kind of mixed recycling, so your plastic and your glass and your metals. It's important to recycle correctly for the system in your area to avoid recycling contamination, because unfortunately aspirational recycling does more harm than good. Aspirational recycling is the action of feeling like something should be recyclable, so you throw it in the recycling bin under the assumption that if it's not, then the individual sorting through your recycling at the materials recovery facility will simply take it out. But unfortunately, this is far from the truth. While practices kind of vary between places and between cities, more often than not, if you perform aspirational recycling, or placing something in your recycling bin that isn't recyclable, especially if it's kind of in large numbers of items, it might cause a whole load of recycling to be thrown out. So not just a bin, the whole lorry to be deemed as unsuitable for recycling because the contents had not been sorted properly ahead of putting them in the lorry. So make sure to check what your local rules are for all of your bins and do actually follow them. Often, even if recycling is limited in curbside, places do have kind of household recycling centres with bigger bins for things like Tetra Pak cartons, so drink cartons, and things like that, which might not always be accepted into your kind of curbside bin. So you might still, this is something that I do, I still kind of collect my Tetra Paks, and every now and again I'll take them all into the recycling centre, so I don't have to throw them into my general waste bin. So if you have space to kind of keep your recyclables that your council can't take straight from you, that's worth doing. If you don't, just still put them in the general waste bin rather than into the recycling. And it's also good to rinse your plastic, glass and metal containers before putting them in the bin. And particularly if kind of paper and cardboard in your area is mixed with other recycling, then it's something really important to do, because kind of making the paper dirty from, say, a yogurt or some leftover drink might just disqualify it for recycling if it's done to a big level. So that's on recycling. Another thing that's kind of connected to the inventory, because you should obviously let your letting agent know or your landlord know if there's a problem straight away. But issues that appear as you're kind of in your house, make sure that you also report them and report them promptly. Your landlord is responsible for most major repairs to your home if you rent privately. So things like the structure of the property, so walls, roof, windows and doors, any sinks, baths and toilets, any pipes and wiring, things to do with heating and hot water, so the boiler, for example, or any of the radiators, so if there's an issue with radiation not heating up. Also things like the safety of any gas and electrical appliances that the landlord has provided. So if, for example, a toaster comes with your contract and it comes with your house, then if something's wrong with that toaster, then it should be reported, and it's in the landlord's kind of area of responsibility to provide you with a new one. And then the kind of big thing is making sure your home is fit for human habitation. So that's a kind of big concept, but it generally means that a house is livable. So it's not going to make you sick. There isn't a lot of mold, for example, anywhere. There isn't major leaks. The structure is not disintegrating. There isn't a huge infestation of some kind of vermin that didn't come as a result of you using the house. So things like that is that's what kind of a home being fit for human habitation means. And then finally, the landlord is also responsible for anything that's included in your contract or provided with the house. So more often than not, student houses in the private rented sector come fully furnished. So any furniture that's provided as part of the house, so things like beds and mattresses, any shelving, any wardrobes, again, repairs to those are the responsibility of the landlord. Obviously, as long as it's not kind of your fault that they got damaged, but the general wear and tear of things with age, that's on them. But as much as that is on them and it's their responsibility, they need to get notified about the problem, because until they get notified about the problem, they don't actually have to do anything about it. And they probably wouldn't even know that there is an issue unless they're actually doing inspections, which we know is not very common. At the end of the day, unless you have a live-in landlord, they don't live in the house with you, so they can't see the problems. And also something worth remembering is that problems could get worse over time. So it's best to report them as soon as you notice them, especially when it comes to things like any leaks from any piping or any heating that doesn't work. Just get that sorted, report that as soon as possible, just so it doesn't kind of create a larger issue. Sometimes the response, as I mentioned, to requesting repairs is quicker if you do it over the phone, or if you see your landlord in person, or you go to your letting agency office. But again, always make sure to follow it up in writing. If your landlord is not carrying out the repairs that you've requested, that you've reported, or the property is unsafe to live in, you should contact the environmental health department of your local council. And I really hope that no one watching this webinar will ever have to do that. But that is an option to kind of take it further if there are problems that are not getting resolved. The next piece of advice is getting to know your heating system and make sure that you know how to use it well, use it in a most efficient way. And this is best to do in this warm period of time, because it will hopefully mean that you discover any problems that there are with the heating system ahead of the heating season when you'll actually need to use it. So you'll avoid kind of the spur of being cold because something doesn't work and you didn't know until October. So things to do is find out where your thermostat and your boiler are, and figure out how to set them, including timers. A lot of boilers kind of come with timers. If the house doesn't have a manual for the boiler, you can also search the model online and familiarize yourself with how to work it that way. And this will also, again, as I've mentioned, help you find out about any potential faults in the system. So, for example, if you set the boiler timer, but it doesn't look like it's working, then it's something to mention to your letting agency. We also recommend setting your thermostat in your home to between 18 and 21 degrees. The best temperature for rooms in your home varies between what kind of room it is, but it generally sits between 18 to 20 degrees. And it's best to set the thermostat to a temperature that falls within these boundaries. Every degree warmer than this can increase your energy usage and your bills by around 10%. So that's something to bear in mind. And again, hopefully this is not going to be relevant to us anymore now that hopefully spring has arrived everywhere in the UK, and we don't actually need to have the heating on until at least late September, early October. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But don't keep the heating on 24/7. If you can program it to switch off when you're out of the house, do that. So for example, if you're at university or at work, if you don't work from home, there's no point in kind of heating up the house if no one is in there. Or if you're tucked up in bed and ready to go to sleep, again, also don't keep the heating on. It's also actually healthier to sleep in a slightly cooler bedroom than a really warm one. So I think 18 degrees is the general recommended temperature for sleeping. So if you can kind of set timers, if you have regular working hours, for example, or you know when you'll be in and you'll be out of the house, keep the heating off when you're out, and then kind of put it up maybe about half an hour before you expect to be back. So that way the house will warm up a bit before your arrival, but it's not going to be overly hot, and it's not going to be an unnecessary expense for when you're not actually there to enjoy that warmth. And then finally, we have some energy and money saving tips. So first of all is using your curtains to keep the heat in. So open them in the morning to let the sun in during the day, or when the outside is warmer than the inside of your home. And then close when it gets dark. And this way you will create a layer of insulating air between the windows and the inside of your home. Next tip is to keep your home well ventilated. So things like putting lids on your pots and pans when cooking so that water vapor doesn't escape from them. And this will also actually make the water boil more quickly when you're cooking something. And also using extractor fans or cracking the window open during and after showering or cooking. So when a lot of water vapor does just kind of end up in the air as a result of the activity. Try to draft proof your home where possible. And again, partly this would be the responsibility of your landlord letting agent. So things like sealants around doors and window frames. If there are any gaps, then you can ask them to reseal them so that no drafts come through. You could also ask them to install some kind of draft proofing solutions, perhaps, to doors and windows. So things like letterbox draft excluders. We have a whole webinar actually on kind of keeping your house warm. So if you're interested in that and learning a bit more about those solutions, you can have a look at that on our website. You could also use draft snakes at bottoms of doors. You could even make some yourself if you want. So that's just kind of to keep in mind, particularly when it starts to get colder again, because unfortunately it will eventually. Next tip is washing clothes at lower temperatures. That's both better for your energy use, and generally it's unnecessary to wash clothes at temperatures above 40 degrees because the kind of the chemicals that we have now, the laundry liquids and the powders that we have and we use now work perfectly fine at lower temperatures. It means that you're saving that energy. It takes a lot of energy to heat up water to a higher temperature. So if the temperature that you're aiming for is lower, then it's not going to use as much energy or money. And it's actually also better for your clothes and the longevity of your clothes to not heat them up in the washing machine all the time. And the kind of basic but always worth to mention one is turning appliances and lights off when you're not using them. So you leave the room, you turn the light off, unplug your microwave if you're not using it, unless, I don't know, you have a clock on your microwave and you actually need it to work. Just unplug it because it's just an unnecessary energy sink. Use the appliances that you have effectively. So again, this is things like don't overfill the kettle. If you're only boiling water for 1 cup of tea, there's no reason to fill up a litre of water unless you have a really massive mug, which most people probably don't. And if you're looking to have your own appliances, or you need to get your own appliances because your house doesn't come with some, choose the ones that are energy efficient. It will be cheaper to run them for you. And I did just want to flag that we do have more energy tips for renters on our website and in our other webinars. We have a whole host of guides that we've prepared around different topics surrounding energy use and energy efficiency that you can look up on our website. And we do also have a monthly newsletter for private renters. So you are more than welcome to sign up to that and receive kind of monthly advice from us. And then the very final thing is just flagging that you do have rights as renters. You do have a right to enjoy your home in peace, for example, and just live in it without being disturbed by your landlord or anyone acting on their behalf. So letting agent, someone coming to do any repairs, or contractors coming to do like a gas safety inspection, something like that. This is called the right of quiet enjoyment. Your student home is your home, and it should be treated like that. It's not just a place for anyone to walk in at any point as they wish. You must get at least 24 hours notice. In England and Wales, in Scotland it's 48 hours if someone is to access your property. And also no one can enter your home without your permission. So even if someone says, oh, we would like to do this inspection at this date, and for example, you're not at home and you're not comfortable with someone walking around your house when you're not there, you can just say no and you can just refuse to give them permission to do that. The only exception to this in terms of just accessing home without your permission is when there is an emergency. So there must be a genuine reason to do so. So it's things like when there's a massive leak, for example, or if there's some kind of fire, or if there's an issue with the heating system that really needs resolving immediately. That's when the house can be accessed without your permission. In any other circumstances, that's just not acceptable. And also your landlord or your letting agents should not be just coming to your house at any point for no reason at all. If they're coming into your house, they should have a reason to do so. So whether that's, showing potential future tenants round, or whether it's an inspection, which again, they can do, but they shouldn't do them more frequently than I think 3 or 6 months. And it probably depends on the place, but it's not valid to say that they want to do an inspection, for example, every week or every 2 weeks. That's not reasonable. So that just to let you know that this is a thing that you have a right to. Many tenants don't know about this and other rights that you have when renting privately, especially if this is your first time joining the sector. So this is why we actually have a 5-minute masterclass that introduces you to your rights as part of we developed it as part of a week of action for students in halls, but it's just a resource that we have available for anyone who wants to use it again on our website. And I will be making sure that kind of any resources that I talk about in here, that they are in the description of the recording on YouTube of this webinar, and that I will send them out via email to everyone who registered as well. So thank you everyone for attending this session. If you've attended online, I am more than happy to take any questions if you have any. So feel free to leave them via the Q&A option. I'll stick around for a bit to answer any, but if you don't have any questions, you are more than welcome to get on with your day. You can keep in touch with us at SOS UK via these means. So you have our general hello email and our website, and you're more than welcome to follow us on social media, where we talk about any projects that we run, supporting students in various different things, including the energy and the housing.